You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Hi, this is Mark, and welcome to the show. On this episode, someone who is a Royal Navy clearance diver and special ops military sniper in Australia got done with his military service, cashed in his life savings, and put it toward stopping poaching in Africa. He lives in Zimbabwe, and he's created this army who are getting the military training that he provides to take on these poachers. His name is Damien Mander, and his TED Talks are legendary. He's really quite a legendary figure in this world of trying to stop these poachers from exterminating majestic species from the face of the earth. One of the most powerful things about our conversation with Damien Mander comes at the very end, where for a moment you realize he's evolved. He's come to this place where he is trying to do so much good for the planet. And he reflects in an instant, and I hope you'll hear it the way I heard it, on what he feels might have been a wasted life until he found this new purpose. For me, it was a real significant moment, and perhaps you'll find it so as well. Heather Ankeny and J. Elvis Weinstein will join me for that. We'll start the show with the Fast 15. Michael Shure will discuss the new budgets coming out of Washington and where the priorities of this government lie. Thank you for all the ways that you support this show. I so appreciate your 5-star reviews, subscribing to the show, downloading the show. We're on YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, and wherever you find us. Thank you. Our website is edge-show.com. You can leave us something in our PayPal link. You can also, and those of you who have done that, wow, really appreciate it. You can also shop through Amazon by going to edge-show.com and clicking on one of the Amazon banners. That'll take you to the same Amazon. As you know, they'll spin off a little something of whatever you spend. It's not more expensive for you. It's exactly the same Amazon, but it's a way to help us keep the lights on here. Every dollar stays with this show, and we will never do advertisements. The idea when we started was that we would remain commercial-free, and we will. So the Fast 15 with Michael Shure, and then a man who is revolutionizing the fight against poaching on the continent of Africa and around the world, Damien Mander. Thanks for being here. Let's get started.
This is The Edge.
The advantage, it means.
Hey, look, I just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
You're listening to The Edge. Join us on the web at edge-show.com.
I have to jump in before the official Fast 15 starts with Michael Shure and say that we recorded a supplemental telephone conversation to that all about the shooting in Florida. So you're going to hear that first, and then we'll reboot and we'll give you the Fast 15 as it was already recorded. This is such an awkward thing, Michael, because we have already done our Fast 15, but then there was a slaughter of high school kids and teachers and an athletic coach as well at a Florida school, and it just didn't feel right for us to continue and not acknowledge this, especially given the fact that you have some very strong views on this and have expressed them historically on this show and in other venues as well. So I wanted to take the beginning of the show and at least address this horror that has again occurred in Florida this week.
Yeah, I think that's the right thing for us to do. You know, it's become routine. If there have been, as every town says, 18 school shootings this year, that number's been refuted. Let's say it's half that, right? It's 9 shootings that we've had this year. That means that every 100 hours there's been a shooting like this in a school in 2018. This has got to stop, and this administration and these Republicans in the Senate mostly and the NRA, they're just dripping blood.
Well, you mentioned that, and some of this dance, of course, we've done over and over and over again, but what was said today by Ted Cruz, for example, was, I can't believe the Democrats are politicizing this at a moment like this. And he was referring to asking for gun control, and Marco Rubio said something similar. It's weird to me that they all fall in line with something that is so at odds with the facts.
Well, they don't all fall in line. Chuck Grassley, the Iowa Republican, he's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and he, for his own fault, has on his record the fact that he wanted and urged the president to sign a bill that made it easier for people with mental illness to get firearms. He now apparently regrets that. He wanted to reach out to John Cornyn, the senator from Texas, the Republican, who said that he wants to have background checks, and Dianne Feinstein, who wants to reinstitute the assault weapons ban, which existed from 1994 to 2004, of which she was a co-author at the time. You know, if this was a Muslim person, it would be politicized within moments. A few weeks ago, Mark, Edwin Jackson, a football player for the Indianapolis Colts, was killed by a horrendous accident, a DUI by an illegal immigrant, somebody who should, not have been in this country legally. And the moment it happened, the president was tweeting about it. So you can't decide when you politicize this. 535 members of Congress are politicians. That's what they do. They're the ones that need to politicize this. And the president himself is a politician as well. That's what they do. The word is in their job title. And it's such an easy out for them to say something like that. This is an epidemic, and it is unique to this country. It doesn't exist anywhere. There's not an NRA in any other country. And if there is a gun advocate group in other countries, they don't wield the same kind of power. They don't give report cards to senators. And the report cards are what the senators work toward, because they know that the NRA goes to their membership and says, this guy got a C, this woman got an A, this guy got an F. Don't vote for the people that got the C and the F. We need all A's. Doesn't exist anywhere, and it's killing our children. And it's not just the children that are dying, and that's horrible, not just the injured. Hundreds of thousands of people that have been exposed to it and cannot get rid of it in their mind's eye. It's an epidemic, and the time is always right to politicize it. And I'll just add, Mark, if people say it's not time to politicize it, when is it time? Okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It's not like in 14 days they say, all right, we've had enough time, let's talk about guns. No, they never talk about it, and that's the fault of Democrats as well.
Well, all right, so let's not talk about this one. It just happened this week. Let's talk about the last 10. I mean, in other words, there are just too many opportunities to talk about it. And
right.
The other thing that strikes me, and when we say talk about it, I wonder why assault rifles, this is an AR-15. And, already I know more about firearms than I ever thought I would have to in my entire life. This is an AR-15 that this 19-year-old, this disaffected, orphaned 19-year-old opened fire with. I don't understand why assault weapons are so easily accessible. I don't understand why people need assault weapons. I don't understand why they need silencers. I don't understand why so many things that have nothing to do with self-defense are so readily available.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, because I agree with you. I mean, this kid, this murderer, he could buy an assault weapon legally in Florida, but he can't even buy a beer in Florida. And the fact that we are so gun crazy, that we are so adherent to the Second Amendment, which was written 250 some odd years ago and interpreted in ways that have made it abused in this country. I mean, listen, I'm on an extreme with this thing. People say, oh, we have to protect the right of hunters. I don't know that we have to protect the right of hunters, but I'll give it to you if that will be the compromise to get rid of these assault weapons. You're right. There's no need for anybody in America to own an assault weapon. I'd argue anyone in the world. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the gun right, the most enthusiastic gun rights advocates, the most responsible as well, they say if you peel away a little, it's layer by layer by layer until they get rid of the Second Amendment. I don't know anyone who wants to get rid of the Second Amendment. That's not true. I know people. I am one. But what I mean is that this is not the agenda of even the most progressive member of Congress on guns. They just want to get rid of assault weapons, and they want to put background checks. They want to keep them out of the hands of the mentally impaired. They want to keep them out of the hands of ex-convicts. Doesn't seem like it's a reach.
I want to ask you something that may seem off topic, but I think it's very much on topic, and that is term limits. Just give me a minute or two about term limits, and the reason I'm asking them, and let me just explain it and put a point on it. I know the NRA has bought and paid for so many politicians. Marco Rubio, it's been now widely talked about in the last day or so, has received $3.5 million from the NRA. The NRA has drenched politicians in money, and they've built fortresses of that money politically so that these people are very hard to take out of office. Why can't term limits have a hearing as so that if there were congressional term limits, we might have a chance at changing something so intractable as gun laws?
I think they're two separate issues. The one question is, do I think that term limits would change gun laws? I don't know. I mean, on one hand, the NRA is so powerful that young candidates would still have to pass their smell test if they want to run as conservative Republicans. And if you have a term limit on one Republican congressperson who's beholden to the NRA on this issue, the presumption is that you would get the same thing in a kind of a plug-and-play kind of way. That may be cynical and I may be wrong, but it seems that that also makes sense, and it's one of the conundrums of term limits. I also think that, that when the Democrats were in office, they didn't do anything about this. This has not been traditionally a big national issue in presidential campaigns, and it's been only in a couple of, in certain local races and state races. Generally speaking, you don't have to run on it in New York State because New Yorkers believe in it. You don't have to make a big deal of it. And you don't have to in Texas either because most Texans believe in the Second Amendment. We just have to get some common sense in there. It's not going to come from Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is and I don't say this, as you know, about every Republican. I'm not saying it because he's a Republican, or I would say it about a Democrat if I believed it. He is a spineless politician, and he is the enemy of not just this issue, but so many others because of how beholden he is, and because he feels a certain way about an issue because of the way his money's come to him. I don't know that term limits would change it. It's always a good idea for some people. The other part of it is if you had term limits, you're going to have some minorities in Congress who get representation and then get seniority, and then boom, all their seniority is gone, and that can hurt constituencies. I don't advocate for either one. I do think that a rule that has created term limits by default is a rule that some of the parties have about chairmanship, that after you serve as a chairman in a committee, you can't necessarily do it again after a certain amount of time. So you're limited in that. Then a lot of these people retire because they don't want to become backbenchers again.
I guess I was reaching because, to me, I said it at the time, if they didn't do anything after Sandy Hook, when 20 children between 6 and 7 years old were brutally massacred, then nothing's going to happen. And here it is.
And that's what I thought. But here, let me put a drip of optimism into this on this case in Parkland, Florida. These are high school students, and they're high school students that are now on Instagram and are now on, Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and television and the internet and YouTube, and they are articulating how they feel about their politicians because of what happened in their community. That social media didn't exist at Columbine the last time this kind of a massacre took place with these kinds of numbers to high schoolers who are opinionated and vocal and so impressive, the ones we've heard from in these days. It's not going to come from an elementary school like Sandy Hook. So if there's anything that leaves room for optimism, it's that these voices are articulate and mature enough to state their positions now in Florida and get Rick Scott, who is thinking about in the next 3 or 4 weeks running for the Senate against Bill Nelson, who is a really anti-gun guy, surprisingly, because of the state he is the senator from. And they will make people listen in Florida. If these voices can do that, then maybe this is really the first time, more so than Sandy Hook, because of the time and the age of these victims.
Wow. I hope you're right. I hope it's the beginning of some change. Yeah.
I do too.
Michael, thank you for doing this sort of supplemental conversation to our regular visit.
Yeah, of course. I wish we didn't have to.
Yeah, me too. And now we continue the Fast 15 with Michael Shure as it was done. Time for the Fast 15, politics, and more. He's Michael Shure, everyone.
Hi, how are you? Oh, that's good. I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yes, some repeat customers.
Yeah.
We don't have very much time. We're going to start with the budget.
Yeah.
There are really two budgets. There's a budget that the president put forward, but that's almost immaterial because the budget that Congress passed, that's the one that
exactly.
we're likely going to operate on.
And never before, I mean, I shouldn't say never before because I don't know if this is a fact, but the president did it after, right? So the White House gave their budget after the budget had already been voted on by the Congress. Since 1974, Congress has required the president to put forth a budget. It's the Presidential Budget Act of 1974. That was a great name somebody came up with. And what it does is it just basically gives a framework. It gives it's like a little budget blueprint. But everything that happens, as we know, in the budgetary process happens in Congress. This year it happened specifically in Congress because the White House gave no guidance at all, and because there were deadlines and because there was immigration to deal with. But the president's budget always gives an idea of what he is thinking, and this was a surprising, although nothing surprises from Pennsylvania Avenue these days, this was a surprising take on what this White House wanted to do, especially in light of the way this man campaigned for the presidency.
And what's surprising about it?
Well, I think to begin with, this is a president who campaigned very hard on infrastructure rebuilding and puts very little federal money into the rebuilding of the infrastructure. It's a man who said he would protect all entitlements, that he wasn't there to mess with them. They're rights that we have, and we've all paid into them. And he slashes Medicaid, he slashes Medicare, he slashes Social Security. To me, the non-defense spending that is being done in this bill is surprising because he talked about a much more enterprising way of doing that. And the giveaways to private sector. I mean, when I say surprising, am I bowled over by it? No, not even a little bit. As a matter of fact, if I had written it, I probably would have written it this way. But when you think about the haphazard way in which this White House approaches everything, it's just so unusual all the time.
Well, the military budget just jumps out. Look, the military budget is bloated already.
Right.
But the budget proposed by the president and the budget that Congress has actually moved forward on, they're not the same budget, although both of them are huge.
Right. They're both, and they're not going to be the same budget. I mean,
no, but Congress has actually passed one that is even greater than the
bigger,
president.
right, because they have 535 of them that want to kiss the asses of the military, and also to get, if the money is going to be there regardless, it behooves the most liberal Democratic representative to vote for it in a way. And I'm saying practicality as the word representative small r of a district where this could create jobs or keep tax dollars flowing. It's important to do that, and that's just the way we've created things. So
when you say, though, kiss the ass of the military, what you really mean is, and I don't mean to sound like one of those people, but I'm going to do it, you mean kiss the ass of the military-industrial complex, meaning that mechanism and those corporations that then, as you say, employ Americans and do a lot for the economy, but it's all toward building arms or building things to prepare us for defense.
True. And and I get into arguments both with myself and my most favorite Democratic friends about this, which is the military, and I don't mean lie down and roll over about everything, because you could have said this about Jim Crow and many other things. It's just the way that it is. The military, though, is just the way that it is, and you are not going to make it go away. You can point out its inefficiencies and its overspending, which has been done at different times, but you're not going to get people to, and forget military-industrial complex, it's translated as defense, it's translated as VA, it's translated as shipbuilding and jobs. And when that happens, while it is the military-industrial complex, it's also, these people are politicians, and this is politics. It's bad politics to not support the military.
Yeah, but you're not, when you're talking about the military budget, in the main talking about the VA, just to stop right there. I mean, most of this is going to weapons.
Of course it is, Mark. Okay. I'm not just, but I'm saying how it translates, and what it appears like to people who are in politics. And that's, it's the difference between calling it the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare, right?
But we're talking about messaging now.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, it's out of control.
It is out of control, and it's 100 in the president's, which was conservative, 195 billion more for that and toward that. And when you look at the increased non-military spending as related to the increased military spending, it's embarrassing.
Also, the Republicans always champion sort of a balanced budget.
Forget. I mean, that's the other part of it. It's, this man ran against deficits. This is going to create amazing deficits over the next 10 years. The CBO says it, the Congressional Budget Office. And as you just said, I mean, this is spending into deficit, and these are conservatives who are fiscal conservatives, and it's why, honestly, you had the Tea Party created by Republicans, why you have the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, all Republicans, because they are opposed to this. But in the end, it's hard to vote against the military, which is what it translates to.
We have to leave that aside for now. I suspect we'll revisit it because they're talking about entitlements as a way to pay down this deficit. The very thing, as you said, you wouldn't speak of cutting entitlements in the past. In any case, but let's move on. What's going on in the White House now is sort of this palace intrigue. You have Rob Porter, who is a critical link to the president. Isn't he's the staff secretary of the White House? Right?
Yeah,
he's the guy who controls flow to the president.
Right, to a degree, he does. I mean, different people have had that role, from Keith Schiller as head of security to his private secretary. So but yes, the answer is that's part of one of his,
So what happened?
But it is now. In the Reince Priebus days, it was more like that for Rob Porter. Now that John Kelly's there, it's really John Kelly who does that.
But he appears, by all accounts, at least, even objective accounts, if you can find them, that he's a competent guy. But apparently he's a really troubled, monstrous guy.
Right. I mean, he's
a wife beater. He's
the classic case of the person who on the outside gets the job done, seems nice at a dinner party, and then goes home and punches his wife. I mean, and that's not a caricature. That's apparently what happened. And these people who are troubled and have these issues are I mean, one of the most frightening parts of it is that they are fully functional, except in that regard very often.
Now, what happens with his clearance? The FBI was aware of this, and they say made the White House aware of this a year ago.
Right. And the timeline that the FBI is talking about today, Christopher Wray's testimony under oath, really conflicts with what the White House says on this. And that's going to be another comeuppance. Whether or not it matters, Mark, I don't know. I don't know what matters. I mean, if you hear the FBI director giving sworn testimony about something, and the White House has consistently said about this case in particular, especially when it revolves around John Kelly and what he knew and when he knew it, that would take any other White House, aside at least for a month, having to answer this and hearings and et cetera. And that these sorts of things don't have an effect on this White House, it seems. Maybe this one will, but I've said maybe this one will probably, 24 times.
There's just really no accounting. Look, it's this simple. If no institution is going to hold the White House to accounting for any of these things, then there's no accounting.
Yeah.
The Congress of the United States is supposed to represent the people, and really the Congress is supposed to hold the White House in check. The Congress is a check on power. The Congress is a check on illegality. And the minute the Congress checks out, then there's really nothing to hold the president.
And the Department of Justice is a check on criminality. And the Department of Justice is a check on security. You had Rachel Brand. One of the small stories that happened since we last met was Rachel Brand, the number 3 at the Department of Justice, stepping aside. And I think it's a small story because to me it screams there's something coming down the pike. I don't want to take over for anybody. I don't want to have to defend this administration. I'm going to just bow out. You don't see career people like that at such an important level of their career bow out unless something is really amiss. And I think people should watch that.
Well, if the president fires the assistant attorney general, then she would be called upon to take the mantle and do the president's bidding, which is fire
Robert Mueller,
the special prosecutor.
Right. But also, I think that has a lot to do with the way the FBI is being treated by the White House that probably makes people at justice recoil.
I see. Okay, that's a different point.
All I am saying is this is a small story that a lot of people are not focusing on that I think is a lot bigger and speaks to a lot of what we're talking about in a very subtle way.
If those who back the president, some would call them cronies of the president, some would call them henchmen. Right. If they infiltrate all aspects of Washington at the top, I'm talking about justice, the courts.
Yeah.
And I understand I'm overstating it to make a point, but there are people who somehow feel this loyalty to an ideal, which is they feel represented by the president. If they successfully infiltrate all these different areas, have we lost control of this
Well, I mean, the last bastion in that case would be the U.S. Congress, and you can't infiltrate Congress in that same way because you can't, as a White House, you can't handpick the people that populate Congress. You coddle to them, and you can.
I would suggest, though, that Michael, they have already begun to do that with gerrymandering.
Well,
they, in a sense, are handpicking.
Right, but they had that began a long, long time ago. I'm speaking specifically about the Trump administration today. But yeah, and there are cynical ways of saying yes. Of course, that handpick. Are you kidding? The power brokers, of course, handpick, and you have wealthy people in Congress. So I don't want to misspeak about that. I'm just talking about the actual operational, mechanical way that it happens. A president and an administration can fill a Justice Department, and they can fill the courts, and they can do. There's a lot that they can do. Of course, Congress is a check on all of that, but it's an easier check. But they can't appoint members of Congress, and. As a law, I mean, you can say, oh, but they basically do. But I'm saying they can't do it actually.
Right.
And so that, and in answering your question, it goes back to, yes, that's where it will reside. That's where the last check is on this White House. And so far, they haven't done anything that makes you think it's going to all unravel. But I think when Congress passed the tax cuts and when Congress passed this budget, I think after the next recess, you're going to see a different kind of Republican, a Republican who is more free to criticize the White House than you've seen. I mean, of course, people say, oh, you're crazy, Michael. What kind of a rock are you living under? But I do know it's an election year, and some members of Congress are going to have to do that.
Michael, I leave you with something that is not political, but I thought that might be of interest to you. I don't mean it because it's something that you need. I mean, you don't need to burn an extra 54 calories a day.
Oh, yeah. Believe me, I do.
Researchers calculate that standing instead of sitting for 6 hours would use an extra 54 calories a day, and you would slowly slim down as a result of simply standing as opposed to sitting.
Slowly slim down, Mark. I think there's a point in your life where 54 calories a day, adds about 20 minutes, and it's probably not a great 20 minutes at the end of your life. So there are better ways for Michael Shure to lose that weight and lose those calories because, standing, while I hear is great, it's I'm going to sit, but I should work out more.
Sitting is, I think, underrated. It can be a great
It is.
thing.
It's a really comfortable thing, too, I've noticed. Yeah. And also, it takes a load off. I've noticed. I think it's better on your knees, which standing, of course... have they polled knees about this?
They haven't really looked at it. They calculated energy expenditure. They measured quantities of oxygen and carbon dioxide as people were breathing in and out.
Right.
And then they established the mean difference between sitting and standing.
And this is why I'm happy that the president in his budget cut the amount of appropriation to the Department of Science and Technology, or the Office of Science and Technology.
It was done at the Mayo Clinic, by the way.
Right, exactly, because science is ridiculous.
Science is so overrated. Why not let's just go with superstition straight down the board?
Right, and let's sit down and talk about that. That's what I say. Very quickly, Mark, I'm going to ask you, what do you think of the portraits of the Obamas?
I like them. They're really different, huh?
Yeah, they grew on me. I didn't like the Michelle Obama portrait at all. Now I love it. The president's portrait I thought was odd, but kind of cool, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
I don't know when we see them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember ever before an announcement in any kind of big way, the way there was with Flourish here, saying, look, the new presidential portrait of George Bush. Or
well, that's because you're not the same kind of loser that I am, and it's a C-SPAN event that I've been watching for years constantly, and those go into the National Portrait Gallery. Some of them hang also in the White House, where presidents and the first ladies, the portraits rotate there depending on who the president is, who he wants to put up on the wall.
I appreciate you always, Michael, coming by and kicking around stuff. I know we've left stuff out. We'll get to more stuff next week. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Michael Shure.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jim. Jim, I'll see you outside after. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Time to meet a real hero. Damien Mander joins us. Heather Ankeny and J. Elvis Weinstein are along for the conversation as well. Damien Mander?
Sure is.
We're very excited to speak with you. I want you to know that Heather Ankeny is here.
Hi.
How Hey, Heather, how you doing, mate?
Well, thank you. You?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for sorting this out.
Yeah, this is really cool. And also, J. Elvis Weinstein is here. J. Elvis, say hi to Damien, please.
Hi, Damien.
So, how's it, man?
Good, thanks.
So we know your time is short.
No, all good. All good. Happy to be on here.
Thank you.
What a remarkable resume you have. If you just even look up Damien Mander on Wikipedia, I mean, it's just insane. I mean, the fact that he was in the Australian Royal Navy and he was in special ops and he's a sniper, and he turned that all into an anti-poaching life. He created a world which is designed to catch poachers and to protect rhinos. You cashed out what monies you could to start an organization to protect rhinos. Is that more or less your story?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys, when you finish up in conflict and in the military, it's hard to reintegrate back into society. So, I spent the better part of a year trying to figure out what to do, and, the better part of a year drunk. And, man, for a lot of guys, the real war doesn't start until the bullets stop and you try and figure out your place in the world. But, I was traveling in Southern Africa and saw what was going on with animals and saw what was going on with rangers, the people that are out there trying to protect these wilderness areas. And not just elephant and rhino, but everything they represent, hardest animals in an ecosystem to look after. And here I was using the shitty skills that I had to help protect those animals. But when you look after the hardest animals to protect, everything else is being safeguarded. The birds, the bees, the flowers, the trees, and so I'd done well in real estate, and I had a bunch of skills that unfortunately needed on the front lines of conservation. So I made a choice to sell up what I had. Maybe not a bunch of money according to by some standards, but it was 100% of what I had, and use that to start this organisation, the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. We're now registered in 5 countries. We're running operations throughout Southern and East Africa. We're the frontline special forces of conservation and the first and last line of defence for animals in many cases.
I see technologies being used to poach these animals. They are using infrared herds of these animals just so that they can get the couple that have the horns, In other words, I see these great atrocities at the hands of technologies that are being used for evil. What is the state of things there, and how do you combat that?
Look, I mean, the most effective thing we've seen for conservation and for battling wildlife crime on the front lines is well-trained, well-motivated, and well-led rangers. Look, there's definitely bits of technology to combat what we are facing out there, but you can't replace people with algorithms in Africa. The more people that we can employ, the more people that we can keep on the right track, the more incentivized the local communities are to work for us as opposed to against us. And that has been a major tool in our arsenal, is having the local communities on side. You can either have a group of rangers, you might have a few dozen people, you might have 50, you might have 100 rangers, or you can have the entire community on sides. No campaign in history over a prolonged period has ever won a guerrilla war, and a guerrilla war is an operation against the local population. And we realise we have to have the local population on side, and the way the economic structure of our model turns conservation into a byproduct of good community work, and that's really what we do. We're moving amongst the local population. We're working with them as opposed to against them, and that's the most effective tool in this war.
How valuable is the horn of a rhino?
Rhino horn is used, as it has been used for a couple of thousand years in Southeast Asia, in particular countries like China and Vietnam. The stuff is not only used as part of traditional medicine, but now being used as a status-related good. Now, you've got rhino horn that's selling for up to $40,000 a pound.
Oh,
and, it's not like, you can have 30 pounds of horn on each particular rhino, and some of these, white rhino will hang out in a herd. There's not just one animal that's there with one set of horns, but you can have a bunch of horns in that herd. So, these things, really, they should be locked up in safes, but they're actually running around in areas the size of small countries. And, we're expected to be out there on the front lines 24 hours a day, knowing where these animals are and how to protect them. The people that are coming through to try and take this, this is organised crime. We start taking money from organised crime, they're going to have something to say about it. So it's important for us to make sure the rangers are trained, well-led, that are out there. We're ready for the worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenario is armed groups of poachers coming through, willing to take the life of a rhino, willing to take the life of a ranger.
I saw a story recently about teams of people tranquilizing rhinos and preemptively removing the horns to save the rhino's life. Is that a widespread tactic?
Yeah, look, we've done that in some cases, and I think where you can dehorn from 100% of the population, then it is a valuable tool. But if you can't dehorn 100% of the population, then you get into a situation where some of the rhinos, the poachers will know that the horn is gone, but they'll follow that rhino if they get to it, and then there's no horn there. They'll kill the rhino anyway out of spite. Also, it's one less animal they have to follow the next time, and then the other half of the rhinos may not be dehorned. So it's definitely not a silver bullet, but it is a part of the solution in some areas.
Okay.
You talk about integrating the community. I have two questions. You've got this really innovative program, and I'll get to that in just a second. But quickly, I want to ask you, with the price on their head being so high, with the economic incentive being to get those horns and kill those rhinos, how do you swim upstream against that? With the community, I mean.
Look, what we need to do is make the community or help the community understand the long-term benefits of having wildlife in the area. When the animals are gone, the tourism and the conservation investment in the area goes. When that goes and the fences come down and the trees come down, the water stops flowing and all the other animals are killed, then you've got desertification. You've got a piece of barren land. And really working with the local population, building capacity within leadership, and local young leaders who understand the future of conservation, which is, as an industry, employs 1 in 13 people across the continent. Africa cannot deal with a continent that doesn't have tourism as a source of income. It's a major source of income for many countries, and we need to keep helping them grow that as an international attraction. And it's these are, ultimately, the not-for-profit work that goes there and the continent protecting these animals as well. A lot of people will say, well, these are African animals. They should be Africa's responsibility to look after them. These are a global asset, and it's a global responsibility to look after this for the next generation.
And you have this program that actually uses this army of women from the community. I think I've seen in a couple of interviews you've indicated they're even better fighters than a lot of the men who've been part of your program for so many years.
Look, it's a very holistic model. It's called Akashinga, which is a name that women gave the program. It means the brave ones. So we've gone into communities, into areas where trophy hunting has traditionally been a source of income for conservation in a lot of these areas. Our job is not to sit down and pick a fight with the trophy hunters. Our job is to sit with them and work out how we can implement a viable economic alternative. The economic alternative model that we've created only works with women. We've employed the most disadvantaged women from the most marginalised communities in some of the poorest countries. Women, from the data that we've got, are spending up to 3 times more of their salary in the household and local community. Women historically don't poach, and much less susceptible in Africa to corruption. So it means we can employ women that directly border the area we're trying to protect. Because we can employ from the area we're trying to protect, it means that the money we're spending on security now becomes a community program. 72 cents from every dollar that we're spending on conservation is actually going back into the hands of the local population at household level, not at government level, not at any other level, but into household level and into the hands of women. And it's been a remarkable turnaround for many of these areas. You've got women who have been in the program for as little as 6 months, buying their own blocks of land, buying their own houses, getting family members back on track in terms of education, schooling, health issues. Whether we like it or not, there's just a growing body of evidence that suggests that empowering women is the single most positive thing we can do in rural communities today. So we've got women that have come from backgrounds of sexual and physical violence, abandoned wives, single mothers, aged orphans. We've taken them into the program. They didn't get any handout whatsoever. They were given an opportunity, and for many of these women, it was probably the only opportunity they were going to get themselves out of the situation they were in. They grabbed it with both hands, and I've made a career out of breaking men and rebuilding them into the soldiers that we need to send them back out on the front line. And I've never seen a level of resilience like I've seen with these women. I think these women, given the resources, will change the face of conservation forever.
That's pretty phenomenal.
We didn't plan things to be this way. We started the program and then we realised, wow, we've got something that's different here. something that's very, very different. And that's when we paired it with the need to replace trophy hunting as a source of income into these areas. Trophy hunting because of activism around the world, because of reduced wildlife populations, and tougher laws and penalties in regards to the import and export of trophies such as ivory. Trophy hunting is a dying species in itself. What we can't afford to do is to allow the areas that trophy hunting has used for all these decades to die out as well. There's too much biodiversity that needs to be protected. And so while people around the world for or against trophy hunting, many people have jumped up and down for a long time saying we don't like it. We want it to end. There hasn't been an alternative to implement. And with these women, and only with women, I believe, there is an alternative.
Yeah, CNN just did a big special. I don't know if you heard about it all the way in Zimbabwe, but it was essentially talking about trophy hunting and representing the fact that the money from trophy hunting helps so many of these communities. And I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Can you just speak to that for a second? Is that true?
I haven't seen the documentary, but I can say that for many years, we have been forced to accept an unethical model because there simply wasn't anything else to fund areas that just weren't photogenic, where tourists were not going to come and spend their time. And, the alternative to a lot of these areas, if the funding didn't come in, would be that there would be no anti-poaching unit and the rest of the wildlife, or no incentive to protect wildlife. And the rest of the wildlife could be targeted by poachers moving into a less protected area. So, look, I think we are at the beginning of a new era where people around the world are not accepting a model like trophy hunting as a way forward into the future. We're now in a generation that's been raised on social media, and the click of a mouse, we can see what happens on the other side of the world and how trophy hunting actually unfolds and the people that are involved in it. And, it's just not cool to get on a plane or fly across the world to shoot something in the face anymore. So, in saying that, though, we can't just pull the plug on it. We have to say, well, money has come into these areas for a long period of time. What are we going to do to replace it? Trophy hunting relies on the same thing we rely on. Trophy hunting relies on marketing an option to a person on one side of the world to be able to come over and shoot an animal. We rely on marketing an option to a person on the other side of the world to protect an animal by empowering a woman. So every $5,800 we raise is a woman recruited out of poverty, out of her own the background that she's been subjected to, given training, deployed on the front lines in what is a 5-year program where she works with us, goes through her own personal development, personal counselling, and career development, and then they will move on into a new career. And Akashinga, the program, is a stepping stone for them, but it's always a home for them to come back to. And when they move off into the world and look back on Akashinga as that stepping stone, they create a place for another woman to move into. I think that's a much more sellable option to an international community than the option of hunting. I think real heroes support the protection of animals, not the exploitation of animals. And I think there's enough heroes out there in the world to make this program fly.
Well, there'll be a link to the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, which is Damien's organization, their website. You want to learn more, make a contribution, whatever, but you can learn some more, and there are ways to support them. I want to ask you about one last thing, and I'm going to let you go. I've heard also this sort of thing that's been floated out there, which is, they need to cull these herds, and that's why so many of these trophy hunters are part of the natural culling of things over there. I mean, can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, we got too many humans in some places too, but we don't talk about culling there, do we? An animal has the same capacity to suffer as a human being. It has the same want to build family structures, the same want to have safety and security. So for us to look at culling as an option is, we're stuck in a different millennium. If we're talking about shooting animals to fix a man-made problem, we need to find man-made solutions to the problems we've created. And one of the problems we've created is boxing these animals in to areas that cut them off from the traditional migration route. So we need to be looking at this scientifically, not trapped in the dark ages.
Do you have to go right now, or give me 2 more minutes?
I'm up in New York, actually. I'm what do I call one of my commando raids. We come in here, get back over there to where I belong. My specialty is counterinsurgency warfare, not fundraising. But actually, no, I'm just actually pulling up to East 79th, Candle 79.
Oh, yeah.
Good vegan restaurant here up on 79th and Leck. Giving a little plug there. I'm going to eat my fill in here. Good for me to come across places like that. I'm not surrounded by vegans out there in the bush, and the whole program is vegan and plant-based. All the women are vegan, but to be in places like New York and Los Angeles and be surrounded by some of the lead people in the movement, it's refreshing for me, and you can take some of the ideas and inspiration back to our programs in Africa.
Yeah, I guess that's the hypocrisy of it that you want to avoid. Like, I was on safari down in South Africa, and you're seeing all these beautiful creatures, and then you go back to the camp and, you're roasting whatever they're roasting. I mean, it's an animal,
Yeah, I know. It just doesn't make sense. And I walked around the bush for 4 years protecting one group of animals and coming home and eating another group of animals. And, like you said, the hypocrisy of that just didn't add up. All these women are vegan because of the environmental issue, because of the animal welfare issue, but the key reason they decided to go plant-based is that they come from a position of vulnerability where they were exploited by people in power. And they're now in a position of authority, and they don't want to project that power onto anything or anyone else.
I'm sure you never thought when you began this defense of these creatures and these vanishing breeds, and they are vanishing, right? The numbers, I think, are really startling.
Yeah, man. We are facing a war across the continent. And look, there's been billions of dollars invested into conservation over previous decades. And if we were doing it right, the situation would be much better. So, to be looking at programs that effectively turn previous models on their head and looking at innovative new ways to tackle problems that are increasing, not decreasing, it's inspiring to be a part of that and to watch these women lead this movement.
I bet you never thought that you would be inspiring to such a group of women as you began this.
No, they're inspiring to me, man. They've made me realise the last 2 decades could have been spent in a whole different way. But, just to play a small part in watching them grow is, it's a very special thing.
Damien Mander, the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. We will have a link on our website at edge-show.com. Thanks for joining us, and good luck. Safe travels.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you.
I wonder if he sort of briefly touched on it, but these women, right? They buy land, but after they sort of graduate from his program, what then becomes their...
What do they do?
Yeah, maybe
They
farm
open up
their land.
Competing anti-poaching shops and screw you over.
It is weird that you come back from safari and then eat animal.
It's truly bizarre, man.
But like what kind of animal? Chicken? I mean, you weren't eating...
No, you're not eating a rhino,
Right.
but you're eating, the same crap that you eat here, which is like beef and...
I like how hopefully she said chicken, though. Chicken. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really hoping for chicken.
Years ago, I went to a major benefit for the Humane Society. This is a long time ago. Now, the Humane Society is involved and quite effective in getting farm animals treated better. Like, it's awful. Better versions of awful than, exist without the legislation. So they're a big lobbying arm. But just hearing in this presentation about how horrible the conditions are in these farmed animals, and then you look down at your plate and they're serving
Komodo dragon.
fucking chicken and...
Yeah, it's just as weird.
It's unreal,
huh?
but it's not the case anymore. Now, if you go to the Humane Society, they evolved past that. But there was a time when they were just like that safari, which is...
Well, when you're doing a fundraiser, too, you have to... You also have to go, all right, well, this person's going to write a check and he wants a steak.
There's a lot, and there's a lot of that in every charity, right? I mean, a lot of charities are facing that now with the Me Too movement.
Right.
Like,
you can't take a check from Weinstein.
Can't take a check from a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Wynn, Weinstein, and all of the names in between.
Right.
When Donald Sterling made those comments that led to him losing the Clippers, he was the owner of the basketball team, the LA Clippers, of course. And he made these comments that were deemed racist. They were racist.
Deemed by
I don't know.
society to be racist.
Yeah. So he made these racist comments, and he lost his team. In the immediate hue and cry after that, people were saying, well, UCLA should give back that $5.5 million their cancer ward took from Donald Sterling. Right. And then they were looking, because he was, like many rich people, a philanthropist, whether he did it for tax reasons or sincere reasons. But, the guy did give the money. And I think that's a bad alley to run down, because... Yeah,
I think let society launder their money, I say.
I also say...
the RNC should give back Steve Wynn's money, but the other good people... can keep it.
No, it's true. I mean, it's a weird thing to be saying right now because it's on the front burner. The RNC will give, they're clearly keeping the money.
Right.
But I always felt, I'd rather that money, even if it's money from a bad place, go to something good, like saving a kid in a cancer ward.
Right.
Then
give it a karma bath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But also shut up. Don't condemn that person out loud either. Just
I see. Yeah. You mean your silence is bought?
Yeah, exactly. If you're UCLA, don't go Sterling bashing if you don't have to. Don't answer the question if they ask, but don't go,
Don't volunteer.
Yeah.
Just save the kids with the cancer and shut the hell up.
Cool to have Heather and Josh along for the conversation with Damien. There are more shows archived on our website, edge-show.com. They're also on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all the places that you find podcasts. You can find ours. Thank you from all of us here for any way that you show us support. Until next time, bye-bye.
It's just something. There we go. Yeah. I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, shit, it's Edge Dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. All right, I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. Show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
Get more of The Edge on Stitcher and iTunes, or go to our website, edge-show.com.